I'm tired. Why doesn't he invite all the people that he gave invitation card to and say, everybody come back to church? Daddy and mommy wear ashoke. Let everybody do ashoebi. And now say, I unvow what I vowed. But rather, you now run away and go to court and say, when you have said before God, I vow to love you and stay married to you regardless of what happens. And then you are now saying, based on what this Bible tells us here, a lot of people are their own worst enemies. Because God is saying, I hate the sacrifice of fools. Think about it, even in human terms. Imagine you are the CEO of your company. You have what is going to engage your time. You have things to do. Then someone tells you, oh, you will follow me to Ileoluji. We want to go and do wedding. You take time out of your schedule. It's costing you money to travel there, sleep in a hotel room, pay for your driver's hotel, give them gift and all that. And then 2 years down the line, he's telling you, she can't cook, I'm not interested anymore. How would you feel? This couple that have stood before God, they've made vows. God does not take it lightly when you make a vow and you break a vow. The only two ways you can break a covenant is by death or by blood, a stronger covenant. Now, you know that the gaze cannot be right, because when they seal their own covenant, there is no shedding of blood on both parties. God, when he sends a woman to the earth, puts a seal on the woman, so that when her husband and her meet for the first time, blood is shed on her and blood is shed on him. So there is a blood covenant tying the two together. But if it is Adam and Steve, there is no blood covenant. And there cannot be procreation from that avenue he's plowing. Pardon my French. So we know that this cannot be God's plan. We are trying to establish that for the Christian, divorce is not an option. In law, they have something called take your victim as you find him. It's from the ancient, one long ago case when Nigeria was still under British rule. I think it happened before 1963. It's called R versus Tralka. In that case, two people were at a bus stop. And from all accounts, the person who got the worst of that incident was the aggressor. And this person who was looking for trouble was looking for the man's trouble, and he started hitting him, and the other man just pushed him back. I said, leave me alone. And the man that was pushed back fell down and died. And in the autopsy, they found out that the man has a medical condition called eggshell skull, which means there are some people whose skulls don't have the regular size of bone. His own bone was congenitally, he has a defect that is paper thin. And just that jolt, the man died. So when they tried this other man for murder, his defense was, I didn't know that he had eggshell skull, because all I did was push him, and he brought all the people who were at the bus stop. They said he didn't fight him, or he just pushed him back. Guess what? The man was found guilty. Yes, because you take your victim as you find him. You have no, are you going to be going around with X-ray machine? Do you have eggshell skull before I push you? In marriage, you take your victim as you find him. If your wife is good, it's your fault. If your wife is bad, it's your fault. Your husband is bad, it's your fault. Your husband is good, it's your fault. But a bargain is a bargain. Talantolo, tololo, tala. You are in this one, you are not going back. I'm speaking to the youth today because so many of the questions that Pastor and myself received had to do with a few things that I'm not going to address divorce, the questions about divorce tonight, because we're going to have to set up a special time when we'll address that. But I want to address one or two of the issues that have to do with our younger ones, because it's essential that you understand what God set marriage up for. what you are signing for when you go into marriage, what it entails to get married and stay married and be productive. So, having said that, I need another reader to help us read from the Message translation, 1 Corinthians chapter 7, from verse 1 to verse 11. And then we will talk about a few things before we close tonight. 1 Corinthians 7, 1 to 11 in the Message translation of the Bible. When you find it, just signify. We'll bring the microphone to you. While we're looking for it, I want you to understand that your singleness does not define you. Many people have this mistaken idea that unless I marry, I'm not complete. And the Bible never compels, nowhere does it say that God compels anyone to marry. There's nowhere it states that. As a matter of fact, by the time we finish reading this passage, certain things should be clearer to you. If you are single and you are thinking marriage will cure everything that is wrong with you, you are sorely mistaken. If you're a single lady and you can't keep your home or you can't keep your room tidy, you can never keep your home tidy. So when the husband-to-be is dancing down the aisle towards you, you are just a dressed-up, dirty person. If you don't handle yourself before you go into marriage, marriage doesn't cure that. As a matter of fact, among my people, they say that marriage is an educational institution. Ilé ọkọ, ilé ẹ̀kọ́. If you are a man who is undisciplined, marriage is never going to make you disciplined. So, ladies, shine your eye. You want to marry the man, he's already the person who is waiting for 40 days to end so he can demolish. In fact, all the mama puts in Antoni village have gone on recession because of this 40-day fast. And you want to marry him, you can be sure that within 5 years, his stomach will be bigger than his chest. You can be sure. Go and write it down. Have you found it? Message translation, 1 Corinthians chapter 7, from verse 1 to verse 11.
1 Corinthians 7.
Yes.
Now, getting down to the question you asked in your letter to me.
Okay.
First, is it a good thing to have sexual relationships? Certainly, but only within a certain context.
Okay, only within a certain context. All right.
It's good for a man to have a wife,
Yes.
and for a woman to have a husband. Sexual drives are strong, but marriage is strong enough to contain them.
Amen.
And provide for a balanced and fulfilling sexual life in a world of sexual disorder. The marriage bed must be a place of mutuality. The husband seeking to satisfy his wife, the wife seeking to satisfy her husband. Marriage is not a place to stand up for your rights.
Okay, hold on before you go further. By the time you attend marriage counseling, Mommy Lawa will explain that passage to you about mutually satisfying one another. I won't address it in open court like they say. But for those who are mature, there is a call on you as a partner that you are not seeking just your own end. Please go on reading it. It's not a call to quote unquote stand up for your own rights. Because when we were younger and we discovered this passage, I remember that it was what husbands used to fight their wives. Because in the King James Version, it says the wife she's not the owner of her own body. So when the man comes and the wife says, I have a headache, you say, again, headache again tonight? No, this is my body and I demand access to my body tonight. That's not the way marriage works. That is what is called you are winning the battle, but you will lose the war. Okay, keep reading, please.
Marriage is not a place to stand up for your rights. Marriage is a decision to serve the other, whether in bed or out. Abstaining from sex is permissible for a period of time if you both agree to it, and if it's for the purposes of prayer and fasting, but only for such times. Then come together again. Satan has an ingenious way of tempting us when we least expect it. I'm not commanding these periods of abstinence, only providing my best counsel if you should choose them.
So in other words, Paul is saying this is not the Lord speaking. This is me as an apostle giving you counsel. Take it or leave it, okay?
Sometimes I wish everyone were single like me. A simpler life in many ways.
You can't tell that to some of the sisters, though. You can't. Because as far as they're concerned, I must marry. I must marry. I must. Sikira has married. Lara has married. In fact, don't ask me to be your chief bridesmaid again. I'm tired. I must marry. Keep reading it, please.
But celibacy is not for everyone.
Okay.
Any more than marriage is. God gives the gift of the single life to some.
What did the Bible call it?
Gift of.
So it's a gift. Really? Go on.
God gives the gift of single life to some, the gift of the married life to others. I do, though, tell the unmarried and widows that singleness might well be the best thing for them, as it has been for me.
Okay.
But if they can't manage their desires and emotion, they should by all means go ahead and get married. The difficulties of marriage are preferable by far to a sexually tortured life as a single.
Amen. Let's rest the reading there. What is Apostle Paul talking about here in relation to the singles? Does anyone understand? Can anyone relate to what he's saying? Or you're saying, Apostle, that's your own you're talking to. Me, I must marry. Me, I must marry. What is Paul driving at? The state of singlehood or singleness is a gift from God. If you haven't been called to that state, if you haven't received that rare gift of celibacy, don't intrude into that office. That's why we're having all these scandals we're hearing left and right of people who don't have that gift, who have by religion or by doctrine forced themselves into it. But there are some people who have given that as their sacrifice to God. Perfectly acceptable. Some people don't have that gift. What most of us need to understand is that there is nothing in marriage that transforms you radically. When we were younger, and we all wanted to drive, for us driving a car was a big deal, big deal. We had to drive, we just wanted to drive. My friend's father, who was a professor in Unilag, used to drive us. Is the classic definition of a naughty professor. The man was so brilliant that he just didn't see things from the way of the world. When I think of how a Christian should be, that man comes to mind because he was living in another world. The rest of us were living in our own world. But guess what? Almost everything he said was right. He used to look at us and say, oh, you people, you want to drive? Downfall drivers are driving, and you will drive till you are tired. Oh, what is all this rush? You just want to drive, you want to drive. He said, the time is coming when you will be tired of driving. We all looked at him and said, hey, let that time come. But for now, we want to drive. For the singles who are going to get married, and all your drive is sexual satisfaction, you will have it tired. There will be a day they will say, come, and you say, again. It cannot be the only reason or the driving reason why you go into marriage. It can't be. Your sole reason for living is to please God, whether as single or as married. And if you don't clean up your acts, if you don't let God work on you, you are setting up yourself for a lifetime of pain, not of pleasure. By the way, God has never promised you pleasure in your marriage. He never did. All he has promised you is, I will be with you. Yes. When you pass through the fire, the flame will not kindle on you. When you pass through the waters, it will not overflow you. He said, I'll be with you. We need to disabuse our minds of all the nonsense in Hollywood. This is what Hollywood says. Husband and wife get up in the morning. Immediately they get up, they kiss themselves with bad breath. They don't care how they kiss. Go in, everybody is singing, happy, happy, joy, joy. By the time the man has finished showering and dressing up, the wife is downstairs, already dressed with lipstick and with a breakfast waiting. He goes in his car, she goes off in her own car. By the time he comes back home, they meet at the doorstep. Oh, how was your day? They go back in the house. Instantly, food is ready. They have fun and everything, goes to bed at night. Oh, darling, yes, yes, yes. And everything goes just that way. Fa, fa, fa. It's not possible. By the time the woman enters traffic from Ajah to toll gate, when you say, how was your day? She says, well, what are you saying? You two will know straight away, okay, I need to pipe down. By the time the man has gotten to work and he has been slaving under someone who is frustrated and sees him as a threat, and they have not sent him out, everyone has traveled and gone and earned Esther code, and they keep on pressing him down. The marriage, instead of it being what you think like that, it becomes something totally different. And if your expectations are not met, then it leads to frustrations, which you begin to take out on one another. And before we know what's happening, you are tearing yourselves apart. Your singleness is not what defines you. You can never, as a Christian, allow a situation to name you. The fact that you are something right now is not a definition that, or it's not the final thing that that's where you will always be. There's something called your position, which is different from your situation. Your position is that you are seated with Christ in heavenly places, far above principalities and powers. Your situation may be that you are still struggling with this and that and this and that, but when God looks at you, he's not looking at your situation, he's looking at your position. And if you understand how your position is, to transit from your situation to your position is not that difficult. Anything in Christianity that is not done by faith ultimately is going to fail. Your walk with God began with faith. It continues with faith. It ends with faith. We have gone on a 40-day fast because we are seeking the face of God. The fast is by faith. If we didn't believe that Pastor heard from God, why would we follow him on this fast? How do we know that it's not just because he wants to reduce his stomach size? How do we know? But it is by faith, because we know that he is the set man in the house, that God has given him a vision, he has given him direction, so we follow him as he follows Christ. If you had asked me before we started that could I last till day 21, I would have laughed. Have there been tough days? Of course there have been. But I'm looking forward to by this time tomorrow. Singleness is not a curse. There are some people that God has called to be single. However, if you are not one of them, you need to go back to God. But what was really striking to me about the number of questions we received is how we have taken sex out of the context in which God gave it as a gift. and how we have abused it. The number of our young men and women that have no understanding of how powerful the sex drive is, no understanding of how pervasive the devil's arithmetic is in this area, is shocking. When Paul was writing in 1 Corinthians 7, what comes before 7? What comes before 7? 6. Let's go back to 6 and read one or two scriptures from verse 12 to verse 20. Anybody can read it in any translation. But just tell us the translation. 1 Corinthians chapter 6 from verse 12 to verse 20.
First Corinthians 6 from verse
12.
12. All things are lawful to me, but all things are not helpful. All things are lawful for me, but I will not be brought under the power of any.
I will not be brought under the power of any. I was, just before you continue, Sister Obi, I was speaking to a young man earlier, and I had to send him some materials I have. Because one of the things that we are not aware of how the devil works is how the devil can dig into your flesh and use it to hook you. Nobody who is an addict today started out and said, I want to be an addict. Absolutely nobody. No one in their right mind wants to be addicted to drugs or pornography. But pornography is one of the things that is so easily obtainable on the internet these days. It's shocking. It is alarming. At a point in time, they had to shut down the FCC, I don't know, in the US, shut down pornographic websites per se. Because people are just going deeper and deeper into deviant sex. Because all they are doing is a preemptive strike against the image of God in man. They want to do the most depraved things that abuses the image of God in man. So that you look at that, and those are the guiding principles in a Christian relationship. You ask yourself, this thing we want to do, how does it edify God? If there's no edification in it, then you need to check yourself. One website that there was a young girl who was trying to use our computer in the house. And she wanted to go to the Disney website. So she typed in disney.com. But she missed the spelling. Guess what? It took her to a pornographic website. People like that should be shot in the streets because they are going after young people, going after little babies. So this young girl came to get me that this thing, and then once it got to that website, she will keep clicking it, it won't shut off, it will pop up again. A very aggressive website. It was designed to get young people. Once, this young man I was talking to earlier that I said I sent some materials to, I sent him the last interview that a mass murderer named Ted Bundy gave while he was in prison. And he was interviewed by a Christian minister. And Ted Bundy said that he got into mass murder because he got addicted to pornography at a young age. Because he did not respect the image of God in man, he kept going deeper and deeper into that darkness till a point where regular sex was not enough, where bondage sex was not enough. Now it became what is called snuff sex, where you actually kill the person when you get to the height of your sexual satisfaction. That is nothing but the pit of hell opened wide. And eventually Ted Bundy was killed, because I don't know how many people he killed, but over 20 people, because he left that door open to his flesh. And the devil dug into his flesh and now began to use it. So if you are listening to me and you are still visiting pornographic websites and you think, oh, I can control it anytime, you are the greatest fool on the earth. The devil has you exactly where he wants you. If you think that I'm lying, let's have a bet tonight that you won't go there for the next 90 days. Even after this fast is over. That you will not go there for the next 90 days, then you come back and tell me, I have control over this thing. But there's no way you can keep on assailing your conscience. There's no way you can keep on bombarding your tender heart and think that you will get away with it. There was a story I read about a man named Mr. Wedgwood. Mr. Wedgwood, don't sit down now. Is it the fast? Mr. Wedgwood, if you've heard the name Wedgwood before, they make beautiful crockery. They make plates in England. Very fancy, very expensive. So they said there was one day when one rich man came and wanted to tour Wedgwood's factory. And Wedgwood, this was in the 1800s, Wedgwood was training one young man. You know, in those days, working with glass, you had to come under apprenticeship. So his young apprentice, he was training him, and it was a very young man, and he took him by hand. And as this rich man was walking through the factory, the man just started talking nonsense, and he started cursing. So Wedgwood just took a beautiful glass that he had been making very expensive and smashed it on the floor. And the rich man said, why would you do that? That was very expensive. And Wedgwood said, I can make another vase, but I can never touch this man's heart again, that you have now introduced bad things into his heart with all this swearing and all the things you're doing. Please leave my factory. When you enter into certain areas, pornography, masturbation, and all those things, you are playing on the devil's turf, and you are asking for trouble. Please keep reading it. Go on.
Food for the stomach, and the stomach for the foods. But God will destroy both it and them. Now the body is not for sexual immorality, but for the Lord, and the Lord for the body.
Okay.
And God both raised up the Lord, and will also raise us up by his power. Do you not know that your body are members of Christ?
Okay.
Shall I then take the member of Christ and make them member of a harlot? Certainly not. Or do you not know that he who joined to a harlot is one body with her?
Okay, hold on. Did you read that? Someone who joins with a harlot is one body with her. So how many bodies does that harlot have?
Yes, so many.
How many men has she slept with? When you get into bed with a harlot, you are getting into bed with every man she has slept with before. When we visited Mali for missions,